Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to go way back in time to explore what is arguably the single most important environmental shift in all of human history. I'm talking about the end of the last ice age. This is the story of how our planet completely transformed and how that very transformation is the reason our modern world even exists.
So, to really get a handle on just how massive this change was, you have to picture two completely different planets. I mean, the world 14,000 years ago, it was a place we would barely recognize. Think harsh, frozen, and just wildly unstable. And then there's today, green, temperate, and, crucially, stable. So what we're going to do here is unpack that incredible journey from that world to our world. All right, so let's kick things off by painting a picture of that frozen Earth. And really, it was a planet that felt, well, almost alien compared to what we know. It was totally dominated by these colossal forces of ice and cold.
And the scale here, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. We're not talking about a little bit of snow. No. We're talking about ice sheets covering North America and Europe that were up to 3 kilometers thick. Just try to imagine that. A wall of ice taller than any skyscraper on Earth, stretching for thousands and thousands of miles. That was just normal. That was the reality.
So, you gotta ask, with all that water locked up in ice, what did that do to the oceans? Well, global sea levels were way, way lower, about 120 meters or almost 400 feet lower than they are today. This meant huge areas of land that are now completely underwater were just dry land. It completely redrew the map of the world as we know it.
And for our ancestors, this totally changed the game. I mean, these weren't just weird geological features. They were highways for migration. You had places like Doggerland, this huge plain that connected what is now Britain to mainland Europe. And of course, the famous Bering Land Bridge, which let the first people walk right from Asia into the Americas. These were entire worlds, whole landscapes that have just vanished beneath the waves.
So who was living in this crazy frozen world? Well, it was small, scattered groups of hunter-gatherers. And for them, survival meant one thing. You had to be constantly on the move. They were following these absolutely massive herds of giant animals, what we call megafauna. The iconic stuff, woolly mammoths, giant steppe bison, woolly rhinos. Their entire existence was built around this tough, mobile life on the frozen plains.
But then, it all started to change. The world entered this period of really dramatic warming that we call the Great Thaw. This was it. This was the moment the planet's entire climate system finally hit a massive tipping point.
Now look, the thaw wasn't like flipping a switch. It was a really long, drawn-out process. But right around 12,000 BCE, something happened. Things started to speed up dramatically. This was the critical moment, the real turning point, that would eventually kick off the geological epoch we're all living in right now, the Holocene.
The physical impact of this was, biblical is the right word. As those kilometer-thick glaciers finally started to melt, they just unleashed these unimaginable floods of fresh water. This meltwater didn't just raise the seas. It carved out brand new rivers, it filled up massive basins like the Great Lakes, and it literally physically reshaped the face of the continents. A frozen world was turning into a world of water.
But this new, warmer world, well, it came with a major casualty. The very first big consequence of the Great Thaw was the total extinction of those incredible beasts that had defined the Ice Age for so long. And that, right there, leads us to one of the biggest mysteries from this entire period. What exactly killed them all? What happened to the mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, the giant sloths? Where did they all go? Well, scientists basically have two main theories, two main suspects. On one side, you've got climate change. As the planet got warmer, the cold, open grasslands these giants needed to survive were replaced by forests. So their habitat and their food source just vanished. But on the other side, you've got, well, us. Humans were getting really, really good at hunting. The consensus today? It probably wasn't just one or the other. It was a devastating 1-2 punch that the megafauna just couldn't recover from.
So the fall of these giants forced a massive, massive change. But you know what they say? With crisis comes opportunity. This is where we see humanity's new dawn. Let's take a look at how our ancestors didn't just survive, but adapted and innovated on this radically different planet.
You see, as those giant ice sheets pulled back, they opened up huge new territories that had been completely off limits before. And humans? They did not hesitate. They poured into the northern parts of Europe and Asia, and they kept pushing, continuing their incredible expansion across the Americas, exploring and settling lands that had been buried under ice for tens of thousands of years. But the most consequential change, the one that really set the stage for everything to come, happened in a region we now call the Near East. In this area, the new, warmer, wetter climate created the perfect conditions for enormous fields of wild grains, like wheat and barley, to just flourish all on their own. And this gave people a brand new, and more importantly, a reliable food source.
And this led to a really logical, but totally revolutionary, chain of events. A group of people we call the Natufians saw all this grain just growing everywhere and started harvesting it systematically. I mean, it makes sense, right? Why keep wandering around when your food is staying in one place? So they started building semi-permanent settlements, the first of their kind. Now, this wasn't quite farming yet, but it was a profound mental shift, the very first step away from being purely nomadic and towards actually shaping the world around you. And that brings us to our final section, and really, the most important takeaway from this whole story, how all of it, was only possible because of one incredible gift, a stable climate. You know, we call our current geological era the Holocene. But what's truly amazing about it, what makes it so special, isn't just that it's warm. It's that it is stable. After tens of thousands of years of these wild, chaotic swings in the climate, the Holocene gave us something brand new. It gave us predictability.
And that stability? It changed absolutely everything. You could say it was the environmental spark that lit the fuse for the agricultural revolution, which is, without a doubt, the single biggest transformation in the entire history of how human beings live.
Because just think about it for a second. If you have a stable climate, you get predictable seasons. If you have predictable seasons, you can plant crops and be pretty sure the rain will come. If you can do that, you can build permanent homes, you can store food for the winter, and once you have that food security, that leads directly to population growth, to new technology, to social innovation, and eventually to everything we think of as civilization: villages, cities, empires, the whole shebang.
So when you look at it that way, the end of the Ice Age isn't just some dusty old geological event, it's the starting line for the modern world. It is the prelude to literally our entire story.
Which leaves us with one last, pretty powerful question to think about. For more than 10,000 years, this predictable, stable climate has been the absolute bedrock of human civilization. You could call it our greatest gift. So what happens if that bedrock starts to crack?